Welcome on in, Eagles fans, to episode 55 of the No Huddle Show, our Philadelphia Eagles podcast right here on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by Elliot Shore-Parks and Mark Eckel. They cover the Eagles for NJ Advanced Media. They were at Lincoln Financial Field last night. We're doing this podcast on a Tuesday. There for Monday Night Football to watch the Eagles drop another game, this time 27-13 to the Green Bay Packers, dropping the Eagles under 500 to 5-6. And now 11th place in the NFC, all but dashing playoff hopes after a season that started 3-0. Elliot, we'll start with you. I'm not going to say you were shocked, because I think you predicted this one, or at least predicted that the Packers would be a very difficult game for the Eagles, more than a lot of people did. But that, I think, for Eagles fans was frustrating, because the Eagles were so good at home, and then on Monday night that evaporated.
Yeah, I did pick the Packers to win this game, and one of the reasons I did was I just think that the difference between the Eagles and the Packers right now is the Packers are a team that has been there before. They've played in these big games. Yes, they're a flawed team, and you can make the argument the Eagles are a better team. They probably have a better defense. They certainly don't have better receivers.
Not after last night, you can't.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, you're right. You're right about that. But I'm saying I don't think there's a huge difference between the two teams. Would you agree with that?
14 points on the other team's place.
Right, but that's one game, though. I mean, like, I think if the major difference between the two teams, in my opinion, is one, the quarterback, obviously, but two, just the Packers have been there before. And that's why last night or Monday night, I didn't think the Eagles were going to win, because the Packers had to win that game to remain alive in the playoff chase. I mean, yes, the Eagles now are basically eliminated, but if the Packers would have lost that game, that would have been their seventh loss. And in the NFC this year, 7 losses is not going to get 9-7 is not going to get you a wild card spot. So the Eagles have to win out now to get in the playoffs. The Packers would have been officially done, and I think that was the big difference last night. You could see that this was a game that the Packers have played in before, they've won before, and this Eagles team, I think they're talented, and I think when they were 3-0, I said I think this is a team that should make the playoffs, and I'll probably end up being wrong about that. But I still think this is a good Eagles team. But I just think last night in that stage, it was just a tough spot for them.
Wow.
It was. And then they got beat. Mark, your thoughts on what you watched.
They played a team missing 6 starters, 2 key backups, a team that was dying, that was ready to...
Well, the Eagles were missing plenty of starters, too.
What's that?
The Eagles were missing plenty of starters.
Not 6.
Not 6, but they were missing...
Okay, but they were home against a team reeling. The Eagles are good. No, the Eagles are who I'm going to play Denny Green now, the late, great Denny Green, and say the Eagles are who I thought they were.
Nah, I don't know.
Not very good. Not very good. Not very well coached. Not very well organized. No skill players worth a damn. Worth a damn.
All right, well, hold on. You said the Packers were missing 6 starters. Here's who the Eagles were missing last night. Ready? Yeah. Lane Johnson, Halapuli Vaitai, right? I'm just saying. Alan
Vaitai, oh wow!
All right, but he's still a starter
on a bad team.
Whatever, he's still a starter, so that's 2.
Good team in the league.
Barber moved over from guard to tackle, so you could make an argument about that. They're missing Brandon Brooks. They were missing Jordan Matthews for the second half. They were missing Ryan Matthews, and they were missing. Everyone's gonna laugh. They were Nelson Aguilar, who started. That
was their decision.
I know. I'm just saying. I agree, and it was a bad decision to bench him completely. I agree, but I'm just saying
that's bad coaching again, like I'm talking about. That's not. They weren't missing Aguilar. The Packers didn't bench Jordy Nelson.
Right. All right. If you want to blame last night on Doug, I will not fight you on that one. But I'm saying the Eagles were missing plenty of players as well. I just think you're saying
you're right.
No.
Just as banged up as the Packers are.
Right, but I'm just. Okay. I guess what I'm disagreeing with you is you're right. At the beginning of the season, you said they'd go 4-12. And you're more right
after they traded Bradford.
Right, but I'm saying as of right now, you're going to be more right than you are wrong, because I don't know if this team will win 2 more games. I mean, we'll see, but I guess my point is, I was thinking about this last night.
Tell me again how great the defense is, by the way, because they weren't missing anybody, were they?
Let's talk, Elliot. After you get this point out, let's talk about the defense, because I thought that was the scene last night.
What player wasn't? Oh wait, Morgan Smith got hurt. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the defense didn't play well, but they also were playing.
Were they hurt? I mean, were they hurt? Was anybody missing on the defense? I mean,
hold on. You said yourself last night, we're sitting in the press box. Yeah. Some of those throws, I mean, that touchdown.
Aaron Rodgers is great. That's why he's going to go to Hall of Fame one day.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So, yes.
Not every. I mean, you still got to do something.
I'm not making excuses for the defense.
Fletcher Cox is getting paid like a Hall of Famer.
Hey, you know my opinion on Fletcher Cox. So I'm not defending Fletcher Cox. I'm just saying look, I think the Eagles defense did not play well last night. I agree. But look, Aaron Rodgers just had an amazing game. I think sometimes you have to tip your cap a little bit to the opposing team. That's all I'm saying.
Definitely do. Go ahead, Al.
Here's what I was saying. Driving home from the game last night, I was thinking about, yes, this team's not going to make the playoffs. And when they were 3-0, I wrote the Eagles should be a playoff team. And I was thinking, was I right or was I wrong? Or, did I get caught up in the moment of the 3-0 thing? And I was thinking, it reminded me of last year when Sam Bradford had that great game against the Packers. And I said to myself, all right, Bradford's good. He's going to be the man. This is going to work, right? And I ended up being wrong about that. And I think the difference is when you compare Eagles fans getting caught up in the hype of Bradford in the preseason last year to them getting caught up in the hype of the 3-0 team this year, I think there's legitimate reason when they were 3-0 to be excited about the future of this team. Yes, it does not look like they're going to make the playoffs this year. I agree with that. But I do think next year, I think they've shown enough positive things that to say that everyone was wrong when they were 3-0, I don't think is correct.
Bradford, they were wrong. If they would have, the schedule makers let them go 3-0.
Well, I mean, I don't know. They beat the Steelers.
And how good are the Steelers? Let's be honest. How good are the Steelers? They're 6-5.
Right? They're not what everyone thought they would.
Exactly.
They're still a good team.
They're okay. They're not terrible. But the Steelers are, like as Joe just said, when the Eagles beat the Steelers, we thought the Steelers were a potential Super Bowl team.
All right. Well, how about this?
They're not.
If I would have told you before the season, Mark, that in their first 9 games they would win whatever amount of them, but they wouldn't lose a single game by more than 7 points, would you be surprised by that?
Yes.
Right. So they've been way more competitive.
I also thought teams were better than they were. The team that they played, I'm talking about.
Right. I mean, there's not a lot of good teams this year. There's a reason the Eagles are 5-6.
I mean, if the Eagles' first 3 games were at Seattle, Green Bay, and Dallas, and they started 0-3, everybody would have said, "Oh my God, they're 0." But they lost. They played those 3 games and lost them now. So and then they played the Bears and Browns later on and won 2 in a row. Oh, okay, now we're getting back. It's just the schedule. I don't know if it did them any favors or not, but it's just who they played when they opened with arguably the worst team in football and maybe one of the bottom 5 teams in football.
Right. But I still think that regardless of how the schedule shakes out, you're right. If they would have played the really good teams at the beginning, they would have lost. So it's like, I don't disagree with you. But I think overall, this team is way closer to a 500 team than I picked them to go 7-9 before the season. And I think now
is that good? That's where your is?
Yes.
No, but think about where we were to start this thing, right? Like they tried. I mean, it's a rebuilding year. Like that's what got thrown out the window when they started 3-0. Because
if you're rebuilding, why do you sign Leodis McKelvin? Why do you bring in guys like that? I think
a lot of teams bring in veterans in the middle of a rebuild. It's not like they gave him a 5-year deal. They just brought him in.
Go for some money, McKelvin.
Leodis McKelvin was a bad signing. I don't disagree, but I don't think Leodis McKelvin signals. I don't think Leodis McKelvin signals that they were trying to win right now.
I don't either. No, I don't either. All right, let's go to the defense.
You sign a 31-year-old cornerback who can't play, and you trade away Eric Rowe, who's starting for the team, is going to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but Eric Rowe, me and you both said all offseason that he can't play cornerback.
I never said that.
Jim Schwartz obviously believed that because they didn't want him here. All right, let's talk about the defense because the defense was not good on Monday night. I mean, let's just call it for what it is. And look, I agree with both of you. Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer, and he had from the first quarter. I started thinking like, he's having one of those nights. It reminds you of when you're watching a great pitcher in baseball, like a Clayton Kershaw or whatever, and the guy's on. It's like, you can't hit him, and that was what I was thinking when he was throwing that ball in perfect spots. But at the same time, Elliot, a few weeks ago, I think it was after the Viking game, Fletcher Cox told you wrote about it, and it was everywhere for a few days. They think they could be the number 1 defense of the NFL or one of the better defenses. I'm paraphrasing what Fletcher had to say. But if you're going to say that, and the Eagles at times have looked like a dominant defense, then it's stark. Like when you don't play well, I mean, that was the first time since 2012 they didn't have a sack or a turnover in a game. And it was the first time they haven't had one at home since 2007. Like that, the defense it was, to me, an embarrassing effort. It's almost like they just kind of shrugged their shoulders like, well, Rodgers is Rodgers. What are we going to do? Like, they were bad on Monday night.
Well, I think the difference between the offense and the defense is the offense is like, it's like you almost feel bad for them. When they make a good play, you're like, oh, that's good. Like, I mean, the offense just doesn't have the talent outside of Carson Wentz. The defense is supposed to have the talent. Fletcher Cox isn't just supposed to be one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. He's supposed to be one of the best defensive players. That's how they paid him. He had the most defensive money. He had the most money of a contract for any player, regardless of position on defense, besides Von Miller before when he got that deal. Then Von Miller passed him, right?
Miller came after him, right, Ellie?
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, right.
He was at one point he was the top paid player defensive wise in terms of guaranteed money in the NFL, and then Von Miller passed him. But all right, so Fletcher Cox is supposed to be really good, right? The defensive line is supposed to be really good. Yeah. Jim Schwartz, right? He's supposed to be like a really, really good defensive coordinator. So the Eagles defense, as opposed to the offense, the Eagles defense should be better. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm not going to completely roast them for last night. I do not think they played well, obviously, because they let up 27 points. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that Aaron Rodgers just was what he was. But the difference is Fletcher Cox is like Aaron Rodgers. We saw what he did last night. That's why you pay a quarterback a ton of money. And last night's why you don't pay a defensive tackle a ton of money, because Fletcher Cox, all right, he had the really bad penalty, so he did not have a good game. But even if you take that penalty away, let's pretend that penalty doesn't happen. He didn't really do much all night.
He had an assisted tackle.
Yeah, okay, so there you go. He had an assisted tackle. And one time Eagles fans love to point out like the stats that don't show up with Fletcher Cox. Like, oh, well, you can't see how he disrupts the pocket. I don't disagree. He disrupts the pocket sometimes. But last night, I can only remember him doing it one time on Monday Night Football in a must-win game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And I'm not it's almost not even his fault. It's just as a defensive tackle, you can't impact the game as much as the Eagles paid Fletcher Cox to do. And with the penalty, that was a bad penalty. This is the third time this year he's done it. After the game, he talked about how, well, it's tough to stop 300 pounds when it gets going. And I don't even agree with him. But the reality is it was a penalty, and this is the third time this year. So
all three losses, by the way.
Right, all three losses and all three big plays. I mean, if I remember correctly, the Eagles were either trailing 17-13. I think they were only trailing 17-13 at the time of that penalty. And then the Packers scored a touchdown and extended it to 24-13, which, clearly ended up not putting the game away. So that penalty was huge. And if you're a $64 million player, you can't make mistakes like that. You just can't.
I believe every single time that one of those penalties has happened with Fletcher Cox, the team has gone down the field and scored a touchdown on that drive.
They were already in the red zone and they scored a touchdown.
Right. And you know what? And look, I understand it's hard to slow down 300 pounds, but that was a close line.
Wait a minute. Every defensive lineman in the league is 300 pounds.
Right. And what I'm saying is that was a close line. Like, it was a penalty. There's no question it was a penalty. He's not playing well enough. The pass rush in general wasn't there. The secondary wasn't. I mean, they just were getting picked apart. I mean, Mark, when you look at this defense, this is supposed to be the strength of the team. And when they have a game like that, it's just they're not going to win.
No, and they also went against the Packers. Again, we're playing with two backup guards. Right? So, backup center to backup guard. That's where Fletcher Cox is supposed to attack. Right? I mean, that's
has in the past.
He got his butt kicked by a rookie last night. That Jason Spriggs, who might be a pretty good player, Jason Spriggs, but that was just like his first start. And I mean, I don't know. And the guy that I really like personally, and he's a great guy, but Vinny Curry, come on, $23 million guaranteed for what you're doing.
See, with Vinny Curry, I don't blame as much because he's not playing as much as.
What's the reason?
But I agree the Eagles need more out of Vinny Curry. And this again goes to the larger picture of all these deals Howie made and how they've worked out. But my point is, I think when you look at last night and you look at games where the Eagles have lost, Fletcher Cox is so far and above.
Oh, sure. I'm not listen, I'm not absolving. Right. He's the kingpin, but I'm just saying it's not just him.
And Fletcher Cox might be the best player on the defense, but it's just like the quarterback thing, right? Like everyone says quarterback wins and loss records don't matter, which I disagree with, but whatever, right? So, I mean, if you're a quarterback, you're supposed to have a big impact in the game. If you make $64 million in guaranteed money, regardless of what you play, you could be a punter. I don't care what you are. If you get that much money, you're supposed to make big plays to help your team win every week. And Fletcher Cox does not do that. He just doesn't.
How many great games has he had this year?
Great games?
2 or 3, maybe, tops.
Let's not forget he was the NFC Defensive Player of the Month in September, guys.
So they played 3 games in September.
Right, I know. I'm being facetious.
I can't think of a.
He earned that. I'm not taking it away from him, but that was against the Browns and the Bears and the Steelers.
I do think he had a good game against the Browns, but whatever. So did Nelson Aguilar.
Who has had a good game against the Browns this year?
That's true. That is true. All right, so the defense was bad, and Rodgers picked them apart, and that's how the Packers got their points. On the other side of the football, before we get into what the offense is right now, what they are, I was going to throw this question at both of you guys because I started thinking about it during the game, and I remember we had this conversation last year. Ultimately, the Eagles changed their coaching staff. Now, I don't think that's going to happen again. I don't think it should happen again. But I remember last year we had a conversation at some point during the season, are the Eagles a well-coached football team? And I started thinking about during the game on Monday night with all the issues they've had, they're third in the NFL in penalties this year, the mistakes. I mean, it's the holding on DGB on that play that could have been a big screen pass to Darren Sproles. Elliot, do you think the Eagles are well-coached?
So I know Mark's going to disagree with me on this, but I do think they are, for the most part, they are a well-coached team. Look, every single team in the league has penalties, and I would bet every single team in the league throughout the season has bad penalties. That stuff happens. DGB, and this is exactly what I said before the season, is talented, but he's just not a smart football player. So that penalty last night, I don't see how you blame Doug. Even the Nelson Aguilar penalty last week where he lines up incorrectly, the coach is on the sideline yelling to him that he's not in the right place. It's not like the coaches are making these mistakes. And the Eagles already have 5 wins, right? I thought they'd win 7 games, so I think they'll get there. Mark only thought had him at 4. I've been impressed with the coaching staff more than I thought it would be. The only person I think you can debate is Jim Schwartz, and that's because he's the only person that came in with expectations, and his expectations were so high. I think overall in 11 games, he's maybe reached them. I think in a lot of games he's come up short, but he also has been dominant in others. But I still think overall this Eagles team is a pretty well-coached team. I don't think they need to make any coaching changes going into next season.
Mark, are the Eagles well-coached? Both sides of the football.
No, well-coached? No. I mean, it depends on your definition of well. I've seen worse, but I've seen a lot better, too. They don't seem prepared as much as they were earlier in the year. Like you said, Elliot says every team gets penalties. True, but the Eagles there's only 2 teams in the league with more penalties than the Eagles, so that's not good. Doug, it's not Doug's fault if a guy lines up wrong or does something wrong, but he's the guy putting it. I don't think Doug's a bad football player. I'm not criticizing his schemes or his philosophy. I think he makes bad decisions, like general decisions, like benching Aguilar. What did they get out of that? They dress Paul Turner and he doesn't even they don't even throw the ball to him once the entire game. What was that all about? Like you said, Elliot, they knew he was I don't think he takes his timeouts at the right time sometimes.
The challenges were bad yesterday.
That 2-yard challenge last night made no sense at all. And then he tries to explain it, and he should not even try to explain things. He should just say, "I did what I did." He makes himself look even not like he's not ready to be a head coach in the NFL. Just little things like that he does. Those not kicking against all those moves. I can't say they're well coached. No, I mean they're not. But in no means do you get rid of them. No, you can't get rid of them. Oh my gosh, it's only been 1 year. They knew when they hired him that he was inexperienced. I mean, they had to know that he was going to have some growing pains. To me, the problem is above Doug. It's the guy putting this team together. Well, I have no confidence that the guy that's in charge is going to turn this team around.
That's what I was going to say. So you said yourself at the beginning of the podcast, they are who they thought you were, right?
They're exactly what I thought they were. Others just aren't as bad as I thought.
But I think
or worse, I should say.
Everyone says this team doesn't have a lot of talent. And I don't completely disagree with them. But for what it's worth, they were still last night in this game midway through the third, right? against a Packers team who I know they don't have a good record or maybe not a good team, but I still think the Packers are one of those teams where they have a really good quarterback. It's always a tough play. I think the coaching staff has gotten more out of this roster than I would have thought. I guess I think ultimately that's my final opinion on the coaching staff.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't think it's a poor coaching, but I've seen a lot worse. But I've seen better too. Haven't you seen better?
Yeah, I mean we all saw Chip the first year.
I'll contend forever that Chip's second year was better than his first, even though they didn't make the playoffs. They played a tougher schedule. They didn't get as many breaks as they got that first year. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on that, Mark. The problem with that was the way it ended, right? Because they started off well and then it ended well.
Again, schedule. They lost Seattle and Dallas that were two 12-win teams.
Right, and then they make the playoffs, right? They came up short, and that changes perception here. All right, so as we look forward with this Eagles team, and we'll get into what the rest of the season is even about. Doug said something interesting, and like you said a few minutes ago, Mark, sometimes in those press conferences he says things, and you're like, why do you even say that? But he had a line last night. Elliot, I think you wrote about this or did a video on it on NJ.com after the game. And I might be paraphrasing, but I think I remember Doug saying something to this effect. You look at wins and losses, and he meant that as you, as in, I think he meant you guys as like you guys, the media, you guys asking him the questions, and he responded by saying, I got to look at potential. So what is this Eagles season about? And not what it is about now, because I think it's pretty clear they're going to have to try to win out, and if they can't do that, they have no chance. But what was it about? Ellie, what did you make of that comment?
All right, let me say one thing before we get to that, because I do think that's a good question. But all right, so after the game, everyone talks to players, and you ask, what was Doug's message after the game? And we're not allowed to hear what Doug says to the players. They only release the videos after they win, so I'm guessing they're not going to release the video of Doug's speech last night.
So no Eagles tweet with the video today?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any cool motivation.
No free coffee, no video, nothing, man.
But what you can do is you can piece together what they said based off what the players said. And to me, I talk 7, 8 players, and I do think there was some message in Doug's thing of it's not over, blah blah. But to me, the majority of the message, it seems like Doug said to the players, based off what they told me, was, hey, who wants to be here beyond this year? Who's going to fight the rest of this season and show they belong? And to me, I get that message, and it's one of those things where people tell the truth and you don't want to hear it because it's one of those instances where you're supposed to lie. Because, yeah, Doug's right. Like, he should be building for the future. That is the right mentality to have. The Eagles want to win this year, obviously, but I don't think anybody at this point thinks, barring them winning the last 5 games, they might not even still get in. So that is the right mentality to have. But my question is telling A, that quote to the media, like you just said, and then B, like telling the players, we're going to see who's beyond this year. But what about the next 5 games? What about next week? I just don't know if that's the right message for Doug to send. I think it's a truthful message, but I don't know if maybe this is one of those moments where him being like a player and a rookie head coach kind of shined. I don't think that was the right thing to say to the team, because you're basically saying, all right, guys, we're not good enough to make the playoffs, but the team we build next year might be, and who wants to be a part of that? And I just thought it was a weird way to go after the game.
I've never in all my years had a coach say, you might look at wins and losses. I mean, yeah.
Remember how Chip was?
Crazy me. That's what I look at, wins and losses. That's what I thought this is professional. I didn't think this was the high school JV team where we're trying to get guys to the varsity. Yeah.
Well, that's the last time Doug coached.
I mean, please. He coached the varsity. Varsity, you want to win. I mean, this is what sports is all wins and losses is what sports is all about. This isn't the participation league where everybody gets a trophy at the end. No. I couldn't believe that quote. I mean, you might look at wins and losses. Well, okay. And guess what? I'm going to keep looking at wins and losses for as long as I do this, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
The weird part to me was, I think if we're all being honest, like, we know that's what he's thinking, and that makes sense, but you don't say, like, there's a difference between thinking something and saying something, and the fact that he said it, that was the curious part. So all right, let's play it forward here. They have 5 games left. They're favored on Sunday at Cincinnati. I have no idea now what they're going to do the rest of the year, whether they win 1, all 5, 2, whatever it is. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. We know the odds are against them unless they win out, and they probably still need help then. But
if they win out, I think they'll be okay, Joe.
Right. I mean, but they would have tiebreaker issues. But you're probably right, Mark.
10 I think 10 will be enough.
If they win out, they'd have a real chance. Clearly, I mean, they'd have the 10 wins.
Be a lot better. Their conference, yeah. But I mean, that's just. I don't think they're going to win out, but I think if they do win out, they'll be in.
Okay, so most likely they don't do that, and they come up, either just short or way short. But what do you think the rest of the season is about? Because I think you guys around them, us, we've been talking about where this season is heading since the 3-0 start. Now, for the first time, it feels like Elliott reality setting in that it's like almost have to develop new goals. What do you how do you think they take this the rest of the year?
The season's about what it's always been about from week one. It's about Carson Wentz. And that's why, even in these losses last night, I still think if you're an Eagles fan, you walk away from that game last night more encouraged about where this team is going. Because I think Carson Wentz, if you don't look at his stats, I think Carson Wentz played well last night. Can we both agree? Does everyone agree with that?
No.
You don't agree?
He's okay. He's average.
I thought he played well, but he makes mistakes that are his. Like he's going to have to clean up the fact that he throws high. Like he has rookie issues, but I like what I see. I played well.
Elliot, everything you rip Sam Bradford for, Carson Wentz did. He did no touchdowns.
Okay, well, go ahead. I'll let you finish, but all right, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you asked me.
No, I mean, the difference is Sam Bradford's been in the league for 7 years, whereas this is Carson Wentz's 10th game. So yes, I agree.
11, but who's counting?
Or whatever, 11th game. All right, he had played 10 coming into last night. Whatever. But my point is, I agree with you that like if Carson Wentz has this type of game in this type of spot next year, like in year 3, yeah, I'll be saying, all right, this guy's not the answer. But I think last night you saw, one, I didn't think he shied away from the moment. I didn't think he, I thought he had one of his better games that he has over the past month. I think there was a lot of instances last night where he moved around and made something out of nothing. I think he made a few really nice throws. Yeah, I agree with you, Joe, that the interception and his tendency to throw high is a problem. I don't disagree with you on that. But you talk about what's the point of the season and going forward. The point's Carson Wentz, and over these next 5 games, you want to see how Carson Wentz plays. And last night, if Carson Wentz, I thought he played. I still came away encouraged last night about Carson Wentz.
Mark, what do you think about that? I mean, overall, I agree with Elliot. I mean, I still think this whole thing's about Wentz this season.
Of course it is. But I mean, yeah, it is. But and again, I say Wentz was average last night, and I'll stick to that. I think he was average, and his rating was average. But what happened with Wentz is what happened with his team. He set the bar so high that first month when he had 3 of his first 4 games, he had a quarterback rating of over 100, which is pretty remarkable for a guy playing his first 4 games to have over 103 of them.
Pretty remarkable for
over
any
100%. What's that?
Pretty remarkable for any quarterback to do that. 3 games go over 100. I mean,
I'll give you that. I mean, but the great ones do. I mean, but
yeah,
for a rookie especially. But since then, he hasn't been over 100 since, and he's been at 75, 60 something last week. Against that defense, that's a defense that Marcus Mariota put up like 150. I mean, he threw 5 touchdowns against them. That's a defense that and again, I know they've been in the league longer, but that's a defense that Kirk Cousins just earned himself another $20 million contract against. I didn't think once. I thought you have to weigh, what he did and who he was going against. Now, granted, he has the worst set of skill players maybe ever in NFL history. So there is that. But yeah, so I guess you don't think it's time for Chase Daniel to come in and save the season?
Nah, I don't think so. No, I mean, you're right. The skill position players and stuff are there, but I
was afraid Wentz was going to get hurt last night.
I was too, especially that last drive when they were down 14 and he was just sitting back there and getting hit. I was like, why is he out there?
Yeah, I thought he was going to get hurt.
See, but I think, all right, so when we were leaving the Seahawks game, it was me, Mark, and a few of the reporters, and we're walking, and we were talking about how Wentz hasn't looked as good of an athlete as we thought he was coming out of the draft. Because that was, his thing, coming in. Yeah, he's a great pocket passer, but he can also move, and that kind of separated him. That was something he could do that, there's a lot of things he can do that Jared Goff can't do. But that was one of the main things people talked about. But I thought, against the Seahawks last week, he didn't look like a good athlete. Against the Giants earlier in the season, he didn't look like a good athlete. But I thought last night was your first sign of Wentz looking like a player that could, in the long run, make plays with his legs. Because, as you mentioned, the offensive line play was not – they were decent last night, but they were missing a lot of players. He had to move around a lot, and I thought he did a good job with that.
I agree. I thought he showed his best athleticism of the season.
Yes. Well, what he did best last night was early in the game when he avoided some certain Sam. Like, again, I hate to bring up Elliott's best friend, but
everyone. Hey, wait, can I say one thing?
Sam Bradford would have gotten sacked 7 times last night, easily.
Yeah, right. He wouldn't have had the touchdown.
And not just Sam Bradford. Any whoever, Matt Ryan would have gotten sacked or whoever. I mean, but that one when he got, I don't know how he got away.
They got flagged. I mean, I think the play got called back, but it was like
had 15 more yards on it with the face mask.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I mean that was like almost like Randall, like putting his one hand down and keeping.
Or Donovan. He looked at but we thought he hadn't done that, but we thought, like you said, Elliot, we thought that's what when the Eagles drafted him, we thought that's what we were going to see more of that.
Right, and so that's my point I'm making is if you
Wentz is fine. Wentz isn't. You say it's all about Wentz, and I agree 100%. But I've never been worried about Wentz.
Right? Yeah, that's all. That's all I'm saying. Like, as long as you take one thing from each game, the rest of the season, you go, okay, like that was good. Wentz did that. That's good.
But Wentz is going to wind up being like Archie Manning if they don't. Not Eli or Peyton. I'm talking about Archie, who was a good quarterback, but never won anything because
look, I agree with you on that. I agree this offseason, we could do 100 podcasts about this. They have to do something about the skill position players. I don't disagree. And I think but Joe says, what do you want to see the rest of the season? You just want to see enough little things from Wentz that you.
I might put him in bubble wrap and let Daniel take him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there is maybe some argument to make for that. But no, I mean, look, as long as you see enough things from Wentz the rest of the season that going into next year, you're confident that if he pieces it together a little better and you give him better skill position players, that this offense will be better. And I think you've still seen that even in losses.
All right, let's wrap with this, guys, before we end this podcast. Obviously, they'll be in Cincinnati. You guys will be there on Sunday to watch the Eagles and the Bengals, a Bengals team that's not what we thought they were going to be, and they've taken a big step back. But based on the mood in that locker room after the game and based on what Doug said and just based on your feel for the team, what do you guys expect the rest of the year? I don't mean just from Wentz. I mean, from the team, the mentality, wins and losses. I mean, do we think they crater now? We've seen this team and some of these individuals crater at the end of a season like they did last year, or do you think they'll play well? I mean, what kind of feel do you have now that most likely, even if they play really well, they can't make the playoffs? How do you think they're going to approach this, Elliot?
So I'm not sure yet, but I do think this has go 1-4 potential to it, because I think this is a team that has to play really hard and almost perfect. And Malcolm Jenkins has said that himself. They have to be a perfect team to win games. And once they're eliminated, I don't know. Put it this way. I think if you ask me what the chances are they go 5-0, I'd say, I don't know, 4 or 5%. If you ask me what the chances are they go 0-5, 20. I mean, I think there's a decent chance that this thing falls apart a little bit. I don't, you're talking about the Bengals next week. I don't know if that's a win. I mean, you're on the road, tough place to play. I know the Bengals are really bad, but they're still a team that's won, a lot of games over the past 5-6 years. I don't know if that's a win. I don't know yet, but I think this has a bit of a feeling of falling apart more than it does rallying.
Mark?
I think next week's game will be very telling. And the Bengals are beatable. And if they win that game, not that they're going to make the playoffs, but it'll give them a little bit of hey, well, we're still in it. Hey, we're 6-6. We never, and then they got the 3 division games coming up. There'll be a sense of hope. There'll be a sense of we're not done yet. We just beat the Bengals, blah blah blah, and we'll write it and it'll all get talked about. But if they lose to the Bengals, and now they're 5-7, and they would have lost 7 out of 9. Yeah. Then I think it could get ugly because then it just could wow, we are bad. I mean, most players who are honest with themselves, they know when their team's good and when a team isn't. They know what they are. So I mean, they might not say it out loud, but they know. And if they lose again, losing breeds losing. I mean, it's just I've seen it before. I've seen it with the Kotite teams that fell apart or Ray Rhodes teams that fell. And Andy's I mean, you see things when things start to fall apart. They fall. They don't. It's not a slow death. It's boom. I mean, so yeah, I think that's this week's game is crucial, and to the psyche of the team.
On a larger picture, that's why this offseason you have to improve this team because you can't let Carson Wentz become one of these quarterbacks. Right? I mean, yeah, that was my point. That was my quarterbacks have to win point. Go ahead.
And the worst part is losing doesn't get them a better pick either. The Vikings have to lose for them to get a better pick.
Right. Right now, they'd be giving up, I think, the 12th pick to the Browns, and they'd be getting the 18th. So right now, it's almost a wash. But losing one way, a down spiral will not help. Obviously,
Help them, right?
It won't. They need the Vikings to lose. All right, last one more because we didn't touch on it. Really, we kind of mentioned it before we wrapped this up. The Nelson Aguilar decision. Now, I think it became even more glaring because Paul Turner didn't do anything, and Jordan Matthews got banged up with his ankle. So they were missing their best receiver and a guy in Matthews that was having a really good game out there last night. So you sat around, you're like, maybe they could use Aguilar now. I thought that it was the right decision. Maybe now I'm thinking more about it. Maybe it wasn't. But what did you guys think of it? And then as it played out, what were you thinking, Elliot?
So before the game, the day before, I wrote making him inactive was the wrong decision. And the reason I thought it was the wrong decision was because, one, he was your starter last week. And yeah, that is the sign of how bad they need another receiver. But, for as bad as Aguilar is, at least, he's played in a lot of games. He's done things, right? And maybe you want to see what Paul Turner can do. But the reason you dress Aguilar is so that you have him there when a player gets hurt or when, Paul Turner doesn't do anything. And another reason was, two, you had a ton of players that you normally put as active as inactive. So you had space to make Aguilar an active player. I mean, it wasn't like they were, trying to find players to make an active to keep Aguilar. So there was that. But then also you said all week the coaching staff said, I don't know what we're going to do. It depends on his week of practice. It depends how he's doing. This wasn't a decision that they made on Monday, or at least if it was, it's not when they told us. So I think it was a mistake by Doug to make him inactive. I mean, we'll see. I mean, if Aguilar has an amazing 5 games, maybe the decision will prove to be right. But I think it was a poor decision to make him inactive. If you told me you weren't going to play him and dress him, I'm fine with that. But making him inactive, I thought was a bad call.
I agree with Elliot. Yeah, I agree. And I would have dressed him simply, and I would have gotten him involved. Again, you have Green Bay secondary is depleted to the point of one guy came back last night, but he wasn't 100%. Randall. I mean, that's a defense that was setting records for yards per pass allowed, passing yards allowed. They weren't doing it, and they wide receivers were putting up monster numbers against them for the last three weeks. That's who you wanted to play against. That's a confidence builder. I would have dressed him. I may have started him and thrown him the first pass of the game, just to get his. I don't see where sitting him out is helping his. I mean, I know Doug says he needs to sit back. Come on, please. These are professional athletes.
And this is my thing. So let's say he plays against the Bengals with all his new confidence, and he has, in the most, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't think it's going to happen. Let's just say, right? Eagles fans are still going to boo him the next week if he drops a pass. It's not and they'd boo anybody, just like any fan would. I mean,
if he goes out and gets 100 yards and 2 touchdowns next week, I'm going to say he should have played. He would have done that against Green Bay. They would have won the game.
And I said to Carson Wentz after the game, I said, how does it feel? What do you think the fact that Nelson Aguilar was your starter last week and now he's a healthy scratch? And Wentz isn't going to say anything. He's not a guy that rocks the boat or anything at the podium. But, I mean, what type of message does that send to the players that one week this guy is good enough to play 70-something snaps and to be a starter, and the next week he's a healthy scratch? So he either should have been a scratch all along or he should be starting. But it's a weird message.
Not for nothing. You know who else they miss a little bit?
Who?
Your boy.
My boy Huff?
Yes.
They certainly miss him on kickoffs.
Yeah, Kenyon Barner's not Josh Huff. There's no doubt about that.
Right. I mean, look, I think, I don't know if Huff would have had a kick return since then, but you can just see. And Kenyon's my boy too, but I'm saying
Kenyon's a better punt returner than kickoff returner.
I agree. Huff has a much better burst of speed off the line than Kenyon does, and that's what helps. But yeah, no, I mean, look,
He's not a great receiver, but he's better than what they got.
The Huff thing, we've debated a bunch whether cutting him or not was the right move. That's kind of moved on. But I don't think there's any doubt they miss him. I don't think there's any doubt.
Yeah, and once in a while he produced a positive offensive play, and he was a weapon, whether it's coming out of the backfield or whatever, and they obviously could use every weapon they could get now. And
he might be going to the playoffs.
He might be. Is that
he'll
team
be on the practice squad? But
whatever, he'll get to go. He'll get to be around it, and the Eagles probably won't. All right, guys, this was a fun one. The Eagles lose, but a lot of season and interesting down the stretch of this season about to commence in Cincinnati on Sunday. Then we'll be back next week to talk about it before the game against Washington. Elliot, as always, thanks for doing this.
Yep. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Joe.
And thanks to all of you for listening to episode 55 of the No Huddle Show. You can subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, however and wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find our show. And make sure to leave us a rating on iTunes. Helps the show grow. We'll be back next week after the game against the Bengals.